Okay, everybody, we're going to do a Q&A today about my book, The Odyssey Effect, How Homer's Epic Poem Shaped the World. This book was written last year. I wrote it in a very short amount of time. I will be uploading a video which is more expansive about the whole experience of writing the book once I sit down. I should just film it right after this. So I'll link that video in the description below in case you guys want to know more about that. But the book is essentially a look at Homeric reception through history. So we start in the ancient world talking about Homer writing the Iliad and the Odyssey. Obviously, in a book about the Odyssey, you can't not include the Iliad. So it's kind of mostly focusing on the Odyssey, but also occasionally dotting in and out of the Iliad. And then each chapter is a different era. So we go from Homer's world to the reception of the Iliad and the Odyssey still in the ancient world, move into the medieval era, sort of the Middle Ages more specifically, then go into the Renaissance, so on and so forth, through to Victorian times, through to modern day, to look at how the story of the Odyssey, as well as characters from the Odyssey, like Odysseus or like Circe, have changed throughout history, right? So that's what the book is. And because I frequently got on YouTube for years and years and years and told everybody, I don't think I'll ever write a book. I don't have an idea for the book. It doesn't seem like it's in my future. That's completely fine. I'm just here to kind of like make silly videos. And then I ended up writing a book. People understandably have been like, what the hell happened there? I get it. I essentially created this mystery all by myself. So for those of you who don't know, I have primary social media accounts under the username MoAn Inc, which stands for Modern Ancients. The ink on the end, by the way, just makes it sound like moaning, and I thought that was really funny. So MoAn Inc is not only on YouTube, it is also on Instagram and on TikTok. However, because the channels have grown quite a bit, here on YouTube I have 50,000 subscribers, and the numbers on TikTok and Instagram just keep getting higher and higher. I am finding it so difficult to keep that community aspect to MoAn Inc because I am just one person, and the point of me starting MoAn Inc was to really kind of cultivate a community and get to know people and be able to talk to people, in the comment section or whatever it is. And as the channel grows and as the social media grows, it's difficult to actually be able to sit down and to know who I'm talking to be able to pick out the community members over, just random people passing through. And so I started a private Instagram account, which is called MoAnlyFans. I'm so proud of that. So that account is private 99% of the time. However, I will on occasional days make it public so that people can follow it. Because the purpose of that is not necessarily that I'm posting every single day. It's there so that I can connect with the community. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because the questions for our Q&A today came from the community who are over on MoAnlyFans. But for now, let's get to the questions. What's your favorite part of the book? Surprisingly, I think my favorite part of the book is probably the more modern chapters, like the last two chapters, because I really got to go into the plethora of adaptations of the Odyssey in the 20th and 21st century. And that's something that I never ever do, really. Obviously, I read, retellings and all that kind of stuff for the channel, for MoAn Inc. I interview authors, but I don't really get time to sit there and to study why these characters have changed, what it says if they're popular or if they're unpopular, all of that kind of stuff was so fun. And I got to look into not only books and even translations. I was looking into different kinds of translations that have come out within the last, century, which was really fascinating, but also films. I did like a whole section on animated films and how they've taken the Odyssey and, warped it for, children's audience. An audience of children is a better way of phrasing that. But you know what I mean? That was absolutely, I think, my favorite part of the book. The part that was the most fun. And also because in research, I literally got to spend days just watching animated films, which was amazing. What made you want to write this specifically? There is a part 2 to this question, which is also favorite chapter of the book, but I'm just going to answer the first one because a lot of people have the question of the favorite chapter. So what made me want to write this specifically is not from me. I didn't come up with the idea for the book at all. It was actually given to me by the publisher. So I will explain this in full in a different video, but long story short, a publisher reached out to me because they were aware that the Odyssey film was coming out this summer at the time of recording. So I'm recording in April of 2026. The film will be out in July of 2026. And they said they really wanted a book that was like this. I mean, they gave me the pitch. I just had to deliver on it. I hope that didn't sound too off-putting, but that's the honest answer. What are your concerns about mistranslations or inaccuracies in any retellings on the market? I'll be honest with this one. I'm not really all that concerned. I think the outside world has much more concerns about this than we do as classicists or as historians. We don't really get big mistranslations anymore. A lot of what we see online where people are saying, oh, for example, Dr. Emily Wilson mistranslated, it's not a mistranslation. It's actually not a mistranslation. I think what a lot of people don't realize when it comes to the quote unquote mistranslations that you're seeing or that you're reading about is that it's just a different way of translating ancient languages. And so therefore, to answer the question, I'm not concerned because we don't have the problem that I think a lot of people think we do. It is a problem that we faced historically, but not one that we have now. And if you're buying a translation, you can always Google what other academics have said about it. Like every single translation has been reviewed by an academic and they have their own opinions and you can read that, you can trust them or not. You know, it's really up to you. I think the vast majority of translations that are on the market that you can buy from any ancient Greek or Roman text tend to be pretty good. pretty good in my opinion. What can we learn from the differences in translations through time about those eras? Fantastic question. Could do a whole video on this. We'll probably do a video on this on MoAn Inc. if you guys want to go and subscribe to that channel so you can see that when it comes out. But really quickly, you can mostly see the individual's thoughts and processes about a translation. Something that we don't talk about enough is that when people are translating, it is unbelievably difficult to separate a translation from a translator. I say this in my book probably 3 or 4 different times across the chapters, which is that unfortunately there is absolutely no way of writing something in an unbiased way. We have completely lost that discussion in the modern world. I see people online constantly saying, we should trust this person, we should do this, da, da, da. The idea of an unbiased account in any kind of historical setting is just non-existent. And that goes for translations as well. Because ancient languages a lot of ancient vocabulary can be translated in like 2 or 3 different ways. That means that people are going to make the translation choice that makes sense for them based on their teaching, based on their background, based on all of those things that are going to impact that one sentence, you know, and what they are taught about a particular author and what they're trying to convey to their modern reader or their contemporary reader, shall I say. But yeah, I'll upload a longer video about this discussion because honestly, looking into translations is so interesting and trying to unpack why translators make certain decisions is one of my favorite topics, more so in the background. I don't post about this online, but yeah, follow MoAn Inc and I can do a longer video over there. How easy or difficult was it to create your style and voice in the book? Christopher, this is such a good question. It was incredibly difficult. It was so much harder than I thought it was going to be because I didn't realize how much of like my previous teaching from being at university and from studying classics in a formal setting was going to impact how I write. This might be a bit surprising because I do have summaries written up on my website, which are all bullet pointed, just like notes for my videos. So if you guys want to, you know, if you watch on MoAn Inc, my Iliad series, I also have corresponding like web articles, which are just the notes from the chapter, just kind of like jog your memory. And those are all very, very colloquial. But as soon as I was employed to write a book, I couldn't write colloquially. Like it took us a couple of tries. Like me and the publishers were going back and forth about the voice that was in the book and how I was writing things. And it was a really hard adjustment from my end. Like, for example, I wrote a sentence that included the word lucid. And I was talking about the ancients' relationship to memory. And I just used the word lucid. And I remember my editor being like, no, you are not using the word lucid and you're not describing memory in this way. Like, this is not going to hit. Because what they wanted was they wanted the YouTube voice. So they wanted me to write how I speak. And that was a really jarring experience. I'm really happy. I think we absolutely achieved it. And I think I kind of got this like middle ground in there that I'm really proud of. But at the same time, it was not an easy feat. What was your favorite period to research? Probably the Victorian period, I think, simply because I had never really spent a lot of time there. Like I kind of knew what classics and the study of ancient Greece and Rome had done during that period. I knew there was a resurgence. I knew that was when we had the massive outward problem of elitism. Like that's where it became really, really obvious. Obviously, all of history had been elitist, but like really in the Victorian era, we know that like all the stuff that we're trying to unpack now kind of came from there. And I just learned so much researching that chapter. And I don't think that I did the period any like good justice in the sense of like, I think I oversimplified so many complex ideas, so many complex thoughts and all of that kind of stuff. That if I could write a whole book about classics in the Victorian era, I probably would. Like, I have the most obscure and ridiculous notes on my laptop that I'm just like, at one point I will use this, and I'll probably never use it. But yeah, it was the Victorian era chapter for sure. Out of all ancient Greek texts out there, why did you choose the Odyssey? I didn't. The publishers chose the Odyssey. And in fact, it was a bit of a wiggle to get them to agree to let me write about the Iliad, because they wanted the book to be specifically about the Odyssey and not about like the wider Trojan War story. And I kind of had to tell them, like, that's not going to work. I was like, I know that you guys are like paying me to do this. I know that the idea is yours and I just signed on to write this project, but you simply can't have a book about the Odyssey not touching on the wider Trojan War story and like the other, you know, mythologies that come with that. So yeah, I didn't pick the idea, the publishers did, but I have to say the publishers were amazing at listening to me and taking my feedback. There were obviously some things that they really pushed for me to write in the book, because again, it's their idea. I was employed to do a job, but generally speaking, they were fantastic, like absolutely fantastic. We're really happy for me to kind of just find my way with the project that they gave me. So yeah, they chose it, but hey. What cool tidbits pained you the most to cut from the book, if any at all? Enough for book 2. Probably not enough for book 2. There is one that my followers over on MoAn Inc already know, which is the general discussion of the sirens, the monster, the mythological monster that is sirens. I really loved looking into how they were in each and every period of history, because they're really the only monster from the Odyssey that are really prominent and really popular and everybody knows what they are, and they change so drastically through history. So I did a very general video over there, and I did say that I could probably write a whole book about the sirens. It wouldn't be like a 90,000 word book. It would be like a 30,000 word book. Like it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be super long. However, there is one thing that I cut from the Odyssey effect that pained me. But before I tell you what it is, you need to bear in mind that I had an unbelievably strict word count. So I had 40,000 words to discuss thousands of years of history and all of these different receptions of the Odyssey. I want to say the first manuscript was closer to 60K until I just forcibly stopped myself, and then I just erased like a load of them, like a load of the words, and I got down to like 35, and then I wrote the last 5,000 words. Like I did something weird like that because I was like, if I just keep writing, we're in trouble. So the one thing that I had to miss out because it just wasn't working was in chapter 2, I wrote about the ancient response to, so like the ancient world response to Homer, because Homer's in the 8th century BC, and I wanted to say, you know, the time that we think of the ancient world, which is like around 400 BC in Greece, but also then the Roman Empire, that comes, you know, significant 400 or 700 years later, right? And so I was looking at how they tackled Homer and how it had changed in just that amount of time and how it was almost like lore to them, you know, it's like crazy old story. And I could not figure out a way to include the play Philoctetes. My editor and I went back and forth about this constantly, because when I handed in the first manuscript, it was its own sort of like rogue little paragraph, because Odysseus is very much the villain in that play. And I really wanted to include it as like, oh, here's something different. And it was reading so disjointed. My editor was like, this isn't going to work unless you can find another thing that links to Philoctetes. And I was like, well, not specific about the Odyssey. It ended up just getting cut, and it's cut for the better. Like, I think it reads so much better now, but as a classicist, it plagues me that, that Philoctetes is not in there. So I am going to upload a summary of Philoctetes, the play, on MoAn Inc. So that way, if you read the book even, and then you come to the channel and you find all of these other videos, you can also find Philoctetes, because I didn't want people to think that I didn't know it was in there, but also I didn't want people to assume that that play doesn't exist, so adding a video. Basically, yeah, that actually does, it has kept me up at night a few times, thinking at the fact that Philoctetes is not in the book. I couldn't write a whole book about Philoctetes, but the fact it's not included is just... What were surprises while doing research? I didn't really have any surprises, I'll be honest. I only signed on to write this book because I knew exactly where I was going with the research. Like I said, about last April, I started seriously thinking about it. And then when I signed the contract in May, I spent a week thinking I was going to throw up, because I was like, I have to write this whole book by the end of August. Like, it has to be done. And so I kind of panicked for about a week, which was stupid because that was like the end of May. And I just was like paralyzed by fear. And then once I kind of got my shit together, I knew where I was going. There wasn't any surprise. There were more so things that I didn't think were going to be as interesting. Like I said, the Victorian chapter, I didn't think was going to be as interesting, but I knew where I was going in the Victorian era. Like, I knew what things I was going to be reading, what, you know, whether it be philosophers or whatever it was that I was going to be referencing. So yeah, this wasn't a book. I didn't have long enough with the book to be surprised by anything. This is all just a very general, overview of the Odyssey, which I knew what I was doing. And the final question is, how long did it take to write the book? So, as I just said, I actually only signed the contract at the end of May. So my publisher's a Quarto. Phenomenal. I am so lucky to be signed with them. They're just the best, and they have treated me unbelievably well. I cannot say higher praise for them. But I signed the contract in May, fully knowing that my first manuscript was due in September 1st, which is not a lot of time at all. So again, I'll upload a longer video going into this, but basically I panicked for May, and then in June, I got my shit together and I started rereading everything. And so I spent a month rereading, finding where I was going to go, who I was going to reference, that kind of a thing. And then at the end of June to the beginning of July, I f***ed off to go and do Muay Thai camp in the mountains. That's a whole other story. Came back from Muay Thai camp, and that was the sort of like around the 10th or 11th of July. When did I come back? I think like the 11th of July I came back. And from the 11th of July until the end of July, I just wrote the book. Like I just sat down and I wrote it all the way through. Like I said, I then had that whole issue where I looked down and it was like 60,000 words and I was like, just erase a lot of it. And then in August, I edited. So the reason why I did it that way is just because I don't know how people do this, but I cannot sit down and just write something from top to bottom and have it be perfect. I know those people. I went to university with those people that like literally the night before an assignment, they were like, no sweat, I'll just write this like 5,000 words. How? So I then in August had to just make it readable, and that was my main thing. So technically speaking, it took me 1 month to write from top to bottom. It was 1 month of reading, 1 month of writing, 1 month of editing. But it was 3 months in total. So whenever people ask me, I always say 3 months. But technically speaking, it was 1 month in the middle. And before you ask, it actually was really calming that month. I just decided not to see anybody. I didn't see any of my friends or anything. I like literally was just alone the entire time. I would get up at like 5 in the morning. I would go to hot yoga at 6, which is something I still do now because I loved that. I loved that routine so much. And then I would just come home and I would just write the whole day. And I would barely even break for food. I had to like meal prep on like Sundays or Saturdays. I would just meal prep for the entire week so that I could just, take a Tupperware out of the fridge, and that was my life. That was my life, and it was great. But yeah, those are all the questions that you guys asked. If you guys want to go and follow MoAn Inc, you can absolutely go and request it, but you'll have to wait until I make the account public so that you can have an opportunity to also ask future questions or to be in on the private Q&As that I have over there. I just want to let you guys know that that account is completely free. There are no charges on that. It's not like a Patreon or anything like that. If you want to support MoAn Inc and the work that I do over there, you absolutely can on Ko-fi. I have also added that link in the description below. But for now, I will love you and leave you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you next time with more videos here on the channel. See you guys then.